Free to ask questions. Okay. Okay, so if we're in our Notepad++ and we have our files and we want to make some changes, I'm going to make changes to all three files and then I'm going to show you how to do the validation, okay? So in the comments, I think for all three, I put in the that you need to validate things. So for HTML, you go to the W3 validator. For CSS, there's a special CSS validator with W3, and with our JavaScript, we use JSLint. Okay, so I'm just going to quick show you how all those things work. Okay, just so we have it recorded for you. So so this right here is the HTML. So let's say I wanted to change the title from Hello World 1.0 to Hello World Better Than Ever. Okay, so and then I'm going to hit Control S to save it, but now I'm going to do Control A and then Control C. So Control A is select all, Control C is copy. So now this is in my clipboard, and I'm going to go over to Chrome and I'm going to just pull up the validator. Oops. And for the HTML and the CSS, you can really just Google it. So then when I'm on this screen, there are three tabs here. The first one is the most common. This is if you already have your file uploaded to your server, you can just put in the full URL and it'll validate it, pulling it from your server. Okay. When you're working on things, that's not super convenient. You could use this to upload the file. So you choose it, find it on your hard drive. But what I find is it's easier for me to just go Control A, Control C, and then Control V here, and then hit check. Okay. Now, presumably, if I didn't change anything else by mistake, this should show green here. Okay. So this means this is good. Okay. So whenever you do anything in your HTML, anything in your CSS, anything in your JavaScript, before you upload it, you should run it through the validator just to make sure there's no errors in it. Okay. So even if it works, if there's errors, then that's going to count against you. Okay. So so that is the HTML, and now I'm going to make a quick change in here. I'm going to introduce an error. Okay, so I'll go to that same line, that title line, and I'm just going to accidentally pull out the tag. Okay, the closing tag, the beginning part, the bracket. Okay, so then I'll just Control A, Control C, and then go back to the validator, and I'm just going to go Control A, Control V. So I selected all that was there and I wiped it out with Control V, and then I'm going to hit check, and it should point out an error here. Okay. So the errors are sometimes a little bit cryptic sounding, but between them, select the ones that make sense to you that you can fix, and sometimes it'll take care of multiples because we're only missing one bracket, but yet it's yelling at us with two errors. Okay, so we took out one character by mistake. We have two errors. There's really only the one error though, right? So so what this is saying is the end of file scene when expecting text or an end tag. Okay, so at line 58, okay, it's saying that basically that there's a missing tag somewhere. Okay, that's really what this is saying, that error message. Okay, so end of file scene when expecting text or an end tag, because it got to the end, it's like, okay, there was a tag that was open and it's not closed, so it's off by one. So that's what this is pointing out. Okay, so obviously the problem is not in line 58. It's not at the end of the document, but that should be a clue to tell you what kind of an error it is. Okay, and then our actual error here is the unclosed element title. Okay, because we forcibly unclosed it. Okay, so that's what it's pointing out here. It's pointing out the title is open, and then there's some text, but there's no closing tag. Okay, so with the exception really of image tags and some other tags that really you don't really need to use much, all tags need to have an open tag and a close tag. Okay, so if you have a paragraph, you open it, you put your text in, and you close it. If you have an H1, you have the H1, maybe a class, but you have the open tag, and then you have your text or whatever's in it, and you have a closing tag. Okay, so that's going to be true of all HTML. It's going to have an open and a closing tag, almost without fail, except for images, things like that. Okay, so now I'm going to fix that problem. So I'm going to, it pointed out the line that I'm in, so it's this title, and I'm like, oh, there it is. I broke that, okay? So we can fix that, okay? So those are going to be like an incorrect closing tag is going to be like probably the most common thing you have. Other things could be if we have a class name here and we, take one of the quotes out, that can cause you some problems. If you have an ID and you duplicate it, so IDs can only show up once, classes can show up as many times as you need them to. So if I say ID hello world column 1 and I have column 2 down here, if I change this to be column 1 again, and then I go Control A, Control C, go back to the validator, Control A, Control V, okay, and then I hit check, it's going to yell at me and say duplicate ID. Okay, I think I showed you guys that before, but this will help you. This will keep you from making some mistakes. Okay, most of them will be just stupid typos. So that is HTML. So let's just put this back the way that it was. Control S. So now let's look at CSS. So let's say I wanted to. I want to just let's see. We'll have the width, but I'm just gonna misspell width. Okay, and we'll set it to 100 pixels, which makes no sense. But we'll hit Control S here. So I've set the body to width of 100 pixels, but I spelled it wrong. So if I go Control A, Control C, and then I go here to the CSS validator. So again, I'm just going to Google that because it's going to be the first thing. Okay. And then I'm going to select direct input again. Control V. If I hit check, it says we found an error, and it says right here on line 9, property width H doesn't exist. And it actually is trying to make a guess here, which is nice. So it says the closest matching property name is width, spelled correctly. So that's even more helpful than the HTML in general, okay? So that is the CSS. So now if I fix this, if I go Control A, Control C, go back to Chrome, and I go back up to our validator. Want to validate again. Validate. I thought they let us just link to it. So I'm just going to go back to the validator, hit direct input, hit Control V. So now it's corrected. If I hit check, it's a congratulations, you're amazing. You should tell everybody how amazing you are by advertising the validator. Okay. So any questions about any of that? Okay, so every time you make a change, you don't have to validate it, but every time you turn it in, you should validate it, okay? But it's kind of on you. Like, as you get more familiar and you understand it's going to pass validation if you fix the width, it's up to you if you want to revalidate it. I'm going to validate all your code. If it has any errors, that's gonna ding you a little bit, okay? So then finally, the JavaScript. This one is, it's a full-fledged programming language, so it's going to be a lot more, this is going to be harder. You're going to spend most of your time like fixing little problems in here, but JSLint is very helpful. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to go Control A, Control C, and I'm going to pull up jslint.com, and I'm just going to Control V in here, and I'm going to hit the JSLint. I don't think I made any changes in here, so this is all good to go, okay? So this is what it looks like when it's fine. So let's introduce an error now. So how about if we, what does it look like if we miss a semicolon? So I'm going to take the semicolon out of line 24. I'm going to go Control A, Control C, and I hit the clear here, and I'll Control V here. Okay, and so now it says expected a semicolon and instead saw console. that's actually a pretty good error message, right? Because we took the semicolon out, and it's saying, hey, I expected a semicolon, and instead I saw console. So why is it saying console? If we go back to here, the next valid line that isn't a, just a blank line or a comment is console log, okay? So it's saying there should be a semicolon between this and console or something, okay? I mean, to be valid, and if this is why the syntax is, we're trying to follow some really strict syntax with JSLint. You might be able, there might be some other valid way of connecting those two lines together, but we want things to be very separate lined. And so yeah, that's a semicolon. Semicolon says end of the statement. And we're really going to do one statement per line. We're not going to stack up statements, okay? So anybody confused by any of that at all? Okay. So one thing to just reiterate, whenever I give you a starter kit, there might be modifications to this line, and JSLint looks at this. Okay. So actually, let's pull this out and see what JSLint says when we don't have this line. Okay. So I'm just gonna get rid of that. So Control A, Control C, and this might be simple, so it might not actually yell at us, but let's just see what it looks like. So if I throw this in here, it's going to say undeclared console, okay? Because console and then undeclared document. So these are not things that are, these things are built into the DOM. These are things that are built into the browser, but they're not built into the language, okay? So because JSLint is evaluating your JavaScript, we have to tell it that those things are valid. So if I Control Z here, okay? By saying browser true, that enables those other functions. It enables console log, it enables document dot whatever, okay, by saying it's in a browser. So because JavaScript can be run on a server without all these things, like we want it to catch the errors that are appropriate to the where we're running JavaScript, okay? So it helps us do that. So all of the other comments are really up to you, but in this case, this comment has to be here and it has to pretty much look like that. Okay, so or you're going to have errors. Okay, and even if your stuff is perfect, if you take that line out and it doesn't validate, it's not perfect to me. Okay, so you want everything's got to be all green. Okay, so any questions at all about validation? Does that make sense? Does not make sense?
It does make sense. There's no question.
Okay, well, damn, I wanted questions. No questions. So what would happen if I put in my HTML into JSLint? I'm going to just copy this, and I'm just going to throw this into JSLint because, oops, pretty much everyone has done this at one point or another when you're just losing your mind copying and pasting things and validating them, right? Okay, so if I hit the JSLint here, it's like JSLint was unable to finish. It gave us errors right out of the gate, but it's not JavaScript, so it's like it's not super helpful, right? So technically speaking, in our comments, if we fix some of these things, this might even validate because JavaScript can be embedded in HTML. It's going to largely ignore the HTML and say things are a-okay. Okay. They're not. So just be aware of that. Even if if your HTML passes JSLint validation, it's not the same thing. Okay. So yeah, if nobody has questions, that's kind of it. It's really pretty easy and it's a huge tool, and use it. It'll be cool. We'll be good. So.